In the land where stories weave the night, a shanty drum so full of might. Legends rise with every beat, echoes of the past so sweet. Melodic guitar sings a tune underneath the bright gold moon. Tales of kings and warriors strong, in our hearts they still belong.
The untold story of Queen Nzinga, the fearless warrior queen who defied empires.
From the ancient voices loud, let us all sing it proud.
The great hall felt heavy, filled with tension and distrust. Everyone's eyes were on Queen Nzinga as she walked in with her group. João Correia de Sousa, the Portuguese governor, sat arrogantly on his golden chair, surrounded by soldiers who mocked us. Behind Nzinga, I stood as her trusted aide, Kafumbe. I was just 20, but I had already given my life to her cause. When we reached the center of the hall, the insult became clear. The Portuguese hadn't given Nzinga a chair, forcing her to either stand like a servant or sit on the floor. The queen's face didn't show much, but I could see the anger in her eyes. She was silent, and the room became tense. Then she turned slightly and locked eyes with me. I knew what to do without her speaking. Kneeling, I became her throne. As she sat on my back, poised like royalty, my spine burned with pride. The room went quiet, except for the governor's uncomfortable cough. In that moment, Nzinga wasn't just a queen, she was a force of nature. The governor's smile faded as Nzinga spoke, her voice strong and firm. If you want to talk, speak now. My kingdom will not kneel, as you can see. The Portuguese group exchanged worried glances. They had underestimated her, but now they couldn't ignore the power in her presence. As the talks went on, I struggled to stay still, the weight of Nzinga on my back, heavy, both physically and symbolically. But I felt proud. This moment wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, our people, and our freedom. Every word Nzinga said was carefully chosen, balancing diplomacy with defiance. She demanded the release of Ndongo prisoners and an end to the Portuguese's takeover. The governor's replies were full of arrogance, brushing off our concerns as unimportant. But Nzinga stayed calm. You talk about peace, but your actions speak of chains, she said sharply. The room grew colder, and the tension grew. By the time the meeting ended, no deal was made, but one thing was clear: Ndongo would not be easily controlled. As we left, my legs hurt from holding her up for so long, but inside, I felt stronger than ever. The news of the meeting spread quickly through the kingdom. In the markets and villages, people whispered about the Queen's defiance. I heard my name mentioned alongside hers, but I didn't think much of it. My role was small compared to the weight Nzinga carried. Still, her actions had sparked something in our people. Nzinga called a meeting that evening with her council. I stood at the edge, listening closely as the elders debated what to do next. Some wanted to try diplomacy again, hoping the Portuguese would listen. Others wanted to fight right away, their anger boiling over. Nzinga raised her hand to silence them. The time for talking is over, she said firmly. If they won't listen to our words, they will listen to our swords. That night, Nzinga began preparing for war. She sent spies to the Portuguese camps, formed alliances with neighboring kingdoms, and trained our warriors in the art of surprise attacks. I was given the job of delivering messages to our allies, a task I took seriously. Each journey through the forests reminded me of what we were fighting for. Nzinga's words echoed in my mind. Freedom is worth more than life itself. The forest became our home and our battleground. Under its tall trees, Nzinga trained our warriors in stealth and speed. She knew we couldn't fight the Portuguese with sheer strength, so we had to be smarter and faster. Nzinga led many of the training sessions herself. Her presence was powerful, no longer just a queen, but a warrior. Her spear was as sharp as her mind, and she expected nothing less than excellence from everyone. Even I, who had never been much of a fighter, was thrust into training. Every hand must be ready to defend this land, she told me as she corrected my aim with a bow. Our first raid came quickly. A Portuguese convoy, filled with supplies and prisoners, was heading to Luanda. Nzinga led us in an ambush, and we struck without warning, freeing our people and reclaiming the resources meant to exploit us. The victory was small, but it sent a powerful message to the Portuguese. Ndongo would not be controlled. That night, the village celebrated, but Nzinga's focus never wavered. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. And as I looked at her, I knew she was right. Nzinga's victory had stirred a fire in our people. More warriors joined us, and the whispers of resistance spread far beyond Ndongo's borders. Our alliance with neighboring kingdoms grew stronger, and our raids became bolder. But the Portuguese were not idle. They knew they had underestimated Nzinga, and now they were preparing to crush her. We gathered in the heart of the forest, strategizing for the next battle. Nzinga was different now, calm, calculating, and full of purpose. Her eyes sparkled with the determination of someone who knew the stakes. "They want to break us," she said, her voice steady. "But we will stand together. If we fall as one." As the Portuguese army drew near, Nzinga's plans unfolded with precision. We moved like shadows, attacking from unexpected places, using the terrain to our advantage. The battle was fierce, but we were relentless. The Portuguese, caught off guard, were forced to retreat. That night, as the smoke of victory lingered in the air, Nzinga stood at the edge of the battlefield. "The tide has turned," she murmured. "But the war is far from over." The Portuguese retaliated swiftly, bringing in more soldiers and artillery to crush our growing rebellion. But Nzinga was always one step ahead, using her cunning to outmaneuver them. As the conflict escalated, alliances were tested, and our people began to feel the weight of the war. Nzinga's resolve was unwavering. She continued to rally the kingdom, ensuring that every warrior was equipped and ready to fight. But it wasn't just soldiers who were needed. Nzinga also called upon the wisdom of our elders and the strength of our women. Everyone had a part to play in this struggle for freedom. In the midst of battle, I found myself growing closer to Nzinga, both in heart and in purpose. There were moments when she would share with me her thoughts, her dreams for a free kingdom, and the sacrifices she had made. I began to see her not just as a queen, but as a mother, a protector of her people. But war takes its toll, and one evening, after a particularly brutal skirmish, Nzinga and I found ourselves alone in the quiet of the camp. The moonlight reflected in her eyes as she spoke, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "This fight is not just for us," she said. "It's for the future of our children, for the generations yet to come." I nodded, understanding fully for the first time the weight of the crown she bore and the responsibility she carried. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the soul of her kingdom. The months wore on, and the battles became more brutal. The Portuguese, now fully aware of Nzinga's brilliance, had fortified their position, and their soldiers were relentless. Yet, Nzinga's strategic mind and unyielding will continued to push us forward. We fought fiercely, but the cost was mounting. We lost warriors we had come to call brothers and sisters. The rivers of blood spilled in defense of our homeland began to stain the earth. With each passing day, the toll of war grew heavier. Nzinga's leadership never wavered, but I could see the strain in her eyes. There were moments when she would stare into the distance, as if she were searching for something, perhaps a sign, or perhaps a way out of the endless cycle of violence. But even in her silence, I knew her resolve was as firm as ever. It was during one of these quiet moments that she turned to me, her voice thick with emotion. "I have led my people to this point, Kafumbe, but at what cost? How much more must we endure before we can taste peace?" I didn't have an answer for her. The path ahead seemed uncertain, and I could feel the weight of our struggle pulling at us both. But I knew one thing for certain: Nzinga would never stop fighting, not as long as there was a breath in her body. Our people were weary, and the land itself seemed to mourn. The long years of war had left their scars not only on the battlefield but within the hearts of those who had fought. Nzinga could see it in the eyes of her people. They were ready for peace, but the Portuguese would not relent. It was then that Nzinga called a council. She gathered the elders, the warriors, and the strategists. The time for open battle was coming to an end. We needed to find another way to secure the future of our people. Nzinga's voice was steady, but there was an urgency to her words. "We have fought long and hard, but we cannot continue to bleed forever. It is time to turn the tide in a different way." The council was divided. Some argued for more bloodshed, believing that only through total destruction could we gain our freedom. Others, more pragmatic, proposed diplomacy, seeing the growing exhaustion in our ranks as a reason to seek a ceasefire. Nzinga listened to all sides, but her decision was clear. "I will offer peace to the Portuguese," she declared, her voice unwavering. "But it will be on our terms. We will not be silenced, and we will not surrender. If they refuse, we will fight to the end, but we will give them the chance to listen first." Her boldness took us all by surprise. It was a strategy that reflected her deep understanding of both war and diplomacy. She knew that victory was not always about overwhelming force. It was about control of the narrative and the power to shape the future. If the Portuguese accepted her terms, perhaps it would spare us the further destruction we so feared. The days that followed were tense. Nzinga sent word to the Portuguese commanders, requesting a meeting. The response came swiftly. A meeting would be arranged, but the terms of surrender would remain unchanged. The Portuguese saw no reason to negotiate with a people they considered inferior. When Nzinga and her emissaries met the Portuguese negotiators, she made her position clear. We would not be their subjects. She demanded recognition of our sovereignty, the return of lands taken by force, and the end of the slave trade. These were non-negotiable. The response from the Portuguese was swift and cold. There would be no peace on their terms. Nzinga knew then that the war was not just about survival anymore. It had become a fight for our very identity, a fight that could never be compromised. The following days were filled with preparations for war. Nzinga had made it clear that there would be no turning back. We could not afford to lose our spirit, nor could we afford to lose our land. Every warrior, young and old, was ready to stand with her. The final battle came swiftly. It was a clash that would determine not only the future of our people, but also the legacy of Nzinga herself. The Portuguese, though relentless, were not prepared for the ferocity of Nzinga's strategy. The land, though scarred by war, became our greatest ally. We used every inch of it to our advantage, drawing the Portuguese into traps and ambushes. The battle raged for hours, but it was clear from the start that the tide was turning in our favor. Nzinga led with a brilliance that I had never seen before, orchestrating movements and counterattacks with precision. She was a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. In the end, it was the Portuguese who faltered. Their ranks, weakened by years of conflict, could not withstand the intensity of our final push. As the battle drew to a close, I looked to Nzinga, and for the first time in years, I saw her smile, a smile that was both triumphant and sorrowful. We had won, but the cost had been great. The land was broken, the people were bruised, but we had preserved our dignity. We had defended our right to exist, and that was something no force could ever take from us. Nzinga turned to me as the dust settled. "We have fought for freedom, Kafumbe," she said, her voice steady yet heavy. "But freedom is not without its price. What we have won, we must cherish, for it will never come without sacrifice." And so, as the sun set on the battlefield, I knew that Nzinga's legacy would endure. Not just as a warrior, but as a leader who had fought for the soul of her people. A leader who had shown the world that no matter the odds, no one could break the spirit of our land. As the years passed after the final battle, peace settled over the land, but it was a hard-won peace. The Portuguese were no longer a constant threat, but their presence still lingered in the form of trade relations and the ever-present shadow of colonial ambitions. Nzinga, ever the strategist, knew that we could not rest on our laurels. The fight for independence, though victorious, was never truly over. Nzinga's leadership transformed the kingdom of Ndongo and Matamba into a symbol of resilience. Our people began to rebuild, not just physically, but spiritually and culturally. The wounds of war slowly began to heal, and the scars became reminders of our strength. Nzinga encouraged the revival of traditions that had been suppressed during the Portuguese occupation, from the arts to our ancestral rites. The people began to thrive once again, united in their purpose. However, not all was as it seemed. Despite the peace, there were still those who sought to undermine Nzinga's authority. Some nobles, having grown accustomed to Portuguese rule, viewed Nzinga's independence as a threat to their own power. They whispered against her, plotting in the shadows. Nzinga knew this and remained vigilant, always a step ahead of her enemies. Her wisdom in governance was unparalleled, and she ruled with an understanding that while the people loved her, they would only follow her if they saw her as strong, unwavering, and just. One day, while walking through the capital, I saw her surrounded by a group of women. They were young, old, and of every background imaginable. Nzinga spoke to them with a fervor that I had not witnessed before. "The future of our people lies in your hands," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "You are the heartbeat of this kingdom. Your strength, your resilience is what will keep our freedom alive. It is not enough to fight the enemy with weapons. We must also fight with wisdom, with unity, and with love for our land." The women listened intently, their faces a mixture of awe and determination. I had seen this same fire in the eyes of warriors on the battlefield, but now it was in the hearts of the next generation. Nzinga's message was clear. The battle for freedom was not just fought with swords, but with the mind and the spirit, and it was the women who would carry this message forward, ensuring that the legacy of defiance and resilience lived on in every child born under the shade of the mango trees. As I stood there watching Nzinga inspire these women, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I had witnessed her transformation from a queen who demanded respect to a leader who cultivated respect in others. She had taught us all that freedom was not just a right, but a responsibility. A responsibility that could only be upheld through unity, perseverance, and a willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. That day, as the sun began to set, I realized that Nzinga's legacy would not be defined by the battles she fought or the treaties she signed. Her legacy would live on in the hearts and minds of every person who had stood beside her, who had fought for freedom, and who had believed that no matter how dark the days may seem, the light of defiance and hope would always shine through.
Gana Kafumbe shining so bright. To Sambayo, united we rise. Moyo mo, Bantu na Bantu are stronger. Nzila yetu we never let go. Nzila yetu Sambayo, from the roots to the skies. Moyo mo, Kafumbe leads we're stronger. Nzila yetu we never let go. in the ancient tone, find the truth that's carved in stone. Kafumba listen, heart so pure, for his people he will endure. Gola muntu vumbulula njia, Angola discover the way. Moyo wangu safisha nia, clear intention. Pamoja sote unity flows. Nzila yetu where the spirit grows. Nzila yetu sambayo, united we rise. Moyo mo, bantu na bantu are stronger. Nzila yetu we never let go. Nzila yetu sambayo, from the roots to the skies. Moyo mo, Kafumba leads we're stronger. Nzila yetu we never let go. Tulamvela, hear the call. Bondelela moyo stand tall. Kwetu ni nyumbani, home is our place. Tukusamba na furaha, we dance with joy and grace. Drums are calling, the rhythm divine. Feel the spirit in every line. From Angola to the world we sing. Nzila yetu, let freedom ring. Nzila yetu, yo yo yo. Tulapambana, let the power flow. Gola muntu, dance in the sun. Nzila yetu, we just begun. Nzila yetu.